Our house is on the agenda, so I'm just wondering what time we could expect that. You think it's 7?
Probably like 7:15, because you're first after approving minutes and just going through site visits and stuff like that. So 7:15.
Okay, great, thanks.
Sure. All right, so it is 6:04 on June 12th, and I'm opening this meeting of the Shutesbury Conservation Commission. And like I said, from 6 to 7 tonight, we're just going to continue going through the regulations. And then at 7, we'll start our regular meeting. Hey, Scott. I see you're in a car. No need to speak.
Yes, we don't want to make you crash by turning on your microphone.
Right. Just continue on doing what you're doing. Is Jan here? Oh, there you are. Hi, Jan.
Yes.
All right, so let's go to the regulations. Let me pull them up. All right, so help remind me, are we on enforcement? Is that where we stopped last time? Or did we get into enforcement? Does anybody remember?
No, I don't have my notes.
Next time we said we were going to do sections 19 to 23.
Awesome. All right, well, enforcement was 17, so we made it through that. All right, so 19 is emergency projects. Okay. Let me know if you guys have comments on any of this. I'm just doing a read through. I think I read all this already and I don't have any comment. I don't have any changes to it.
Is there any way you could bump up the size of that just 1 or 2 clicks?
Yep. Oh. Oh, that's the font.
No, yeah,
How's
there you
that?
go.
That helped, thank you. Quick question, Beth. When emergency calls come in, how is it what's the chain of how does it get to you, or is it you that issues the immediate e-cert?
Yeah, I mean, since they're an emergency, people are going to reach out to Mateo or they're going to reach out to me. And then as chair, yeah, I can definitely sign off on an emergency cert. A site visit is required. So is authority or issuance that it's an emergency by a public agency. So it's usually not something that just, there's a few things that have to be
Sure.
looked into and determined before the emergency cert is complete, really. But once we have all the information to put on the form, a good description of the work that's going to happen, I can sign off on it. If it's close enough to a meeting and the person's willing to wait a day or two, I would certainly bring it to a meeting to have you guys approve it. Otherwise, it'll definitely get ratified at the next meeting. But also, if it's something, I do try to pull everybody in. Like if everybody within that short time frame can actually go do a quick site visit or, just be part of the process. that's how I go about doing it.
Great.
So an example might be, we had the homeowner who had her parking area washed out on Wendell Road during that weird
Mhm.
spring storm we had.
Right.
If she wanted to, immediately address the washout so she could continue to park there. She was in a weird situation where there was sort of no other parking on her property. And she can't get a hold of one of us because whatever, we're not handy. Um, what then? I mean, that would be an after certification if they had to go in there and smooth something else, just to be able to conduct themselves safely. What do you do then?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody like that situation happens and they have to do something within the next couple hours or something and they can't get in touch with any of us, and then they go ahead and do something that again is in resource areas or even within buffer zone, we would want to look at it as soon as possible. And then
Mhm.
we would possibly, even with emergency certs, if somebody comes to us and we do issue them an emergency cert, depending on the situation, we can require a post application where they're, applying, they're submitting an RDA, or even if it's a very complicated situation, an actual NOI, especially if they sort of temporarily fix the situation, but then they're going to need to go in and do more to fix the situation. And again, it's in resource area or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, if they can't reach the Conservation Commission and it's an emergency and they need to do something, there's not much, we certainly can't say that they just can't, fix their emergency situation. But, most likely if they contact the town, hopefully the town would be able to contact one of us to deal with it. If I'm on vacation or something like that, Mateo would know that and would contact one of you to deal with the situation. But
And if it is a state declared emergency, what happens then?
when the state declares emergencies, then we don't need to require emergency certifications. The way that usually works is they spell it out very clearly in their announcement what kind of work is allowed right now. Like if there's a huge storm and there's a whole lot of trees down everywhere, and electrical lines, whatever, across the state or even just a portion of the state, the DEP can declare that it's an emergency and this is the type of work that can happen right now without talking to DEP, without talking to the Conservation Commission. But then there's also usually language in there about, again, talking to the commission or DEP afterwards and saying what you did. And then potentially if we say, okay, well, we'd like to see a little follow-up work and we'd like you to file for whatever additional work you're gonna have to do. But it's all very spelled out by the state when they make those announcements as to what they're allowing and for how long they're allowing it. That kind of
Okay.
thing. Yeah, but this emergency description of emergency certs is very similar to what's in the Wetlands Protection Act. They're good for 30 days. And a good description of what work we're actually saying is being allowed to be done has to be provided and written into the emergency cert. And then there is a form, there's a DEP form. So that helps with sort of like the clarity of the whole thing. And a copy of it goes to DEP and the Concom ratifies it at the next meeting. And let's see, emergencies where work is proposed within an area identified by natural heritage require separate independent permission from Natural Heritage. So Natural Heritage has its own emergency procedure. Which sometimes can be harder to get. And I have had very recent experience with this than Conservation Commission emergency certs. So if you're in natural heritage area, be sure to reach out to them. They have their own process and sometimes they're a little more restrictive. They also have exemptions though. So if down by the lake, there is some natural heritage and it's just good to check out their webpage and see how they deal with things because they have lists of exemptions. Does anybody have any questions about emergency certs? Or comments?
It seems very complete, and it was good to kind of hear you run through how it works in actuality. So I'm good with it.
Okay. Like when we had the culvert blowout on what's the name of that road over there? Not Leonard Road, Baker. On Baker, Jan was the one who took the pictures right away because I couldn't get there. So, if we all need to kind of work together to deal with the things that come up really quickly. All right. Appeals. Oops. Any person aggrieved by a decision of the commission may appeal to a court of competent jurisdiction pursuant to blah, blah, blah. So that is true.
Now, would that be when that's said, does it mean Superior Court or does it mean goes to DP adjudication?
If it's an appeal to something that is under Wetlands Protection Act, so when an RDA is approved, it's usually approved under both. And so if it is one that's been approved under the Wetlands Protection Act, the appeal goes to DEP.
Okay.
Often what can happen is something isn't something that, so it's something that's special under our bylaw that maybe is being appealed. And in that case, it would go to a court of competent jurisdiction. I guess that's Superior Court. I'm not sure. Is it? Mayor? You're the lawyer?
Could be district. I don't know. I don't know. It could be district. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the way that works. I'm pretty sure if it's something that, is something that's, yes, it's under both jurisdictions. It goes to DEP and they do their process. When I've seen things go to court, it's been when it's something DEP is not going to deal with because it's not under their Wetlands Protection Act. Severability. In the section of provisions of shall not invalidate any other section. Yep. In any court of the common shall invalidate any provision of other, the commission may promulgate additional regulations or present amendments. Okay. That's just legal stuff. That's in all regulations. The effective date. Effective on passage by the commission and filing with the clerk. Can't wait. And at that time, shall not be subject to re-review. Yep. Yeah. It's good. Amendments may be amended. Okay. These minimal working conditions, timeframes. How do people feel about the 10 business days for submitting things prior?
Um, I found in the two towns I've worked in that we did and do 14 days. Just because we kind of submit it the day of one meeting and then it'll be ready for the next day, and that works out for the different notifications of abutters that need to go out and so on. Um, if we could handle it in 10, us getting the information, digesting it, and being ready to rule on it, I'm okay with it. But I just want to say that it's 14 days in at least three towns that I know of.
Yeah, that's where I'm more used to 14 days also.
14 certainly makes sense as Bob described it.
I'm trying to, oopsie. No, what just happened? Oh, that wasn't good. Yeah. I'm trying to get it so I can make the edits. And I just lost our place. Oh, suggest edits. I like that too. All right. Miriam?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, if you make it 14 business days, that's almost 3 weeks, and you have to
Mhm.
hold a hearing within 21 days for an RDA. So if you're requiring an application, just be aware of that piece.
Hmm.
I think that's a valid point. Yeah, when I was thinking 14 days, I was thinking 2 weeks, and 10 business days probably is the same description of that amount of time, and it would allow us to debit the vacation days as well. So I guess I was saying the same thing as the regulation said, which and not even realizing it.
Yeah. Hmm. My screen is just not big enough. Okay, 10 business days. Makes sense.
Quick question on the plans 263 drawn to scale. The is that for a sometimes sketch plans are allowed for determinations, or I should ask that instead of saying it. Do you allow hand-drawn sketch plans for determinations of applicability?
Um, yeah, I think we've definitely done that, and also for administrative approvals, or what's under here is going to be small project permits. So this is filing requirements, fees, and minimal working conditions. So it doesn't say for which type of application. Well, here, all RDAs, NOIs, and ANRADs. So it's not the small projects, but it is the REAs. We could add a sentence of like, unless waived by the commission. So in some situations, where it's just a resident submitting an RDA and we really feel like in the situation, for making them produce something that's drawn to scale would be difficult, we can waive that. But in
Yeah,
general, we would like to see ones that are drawn to scale.
I like that. I think that's fair. Something to the effect of unless formally waived by the commission or something like that.
Yeah. Or just waived.
Unless waived.
Do you want to do it in that direction, or do you want to do it plans? Something to the effect of drawn to scale if required by the commission, since that might require somebody beyond.
I'd rather have it be the requirement that they're drawn to scale unless we say no, because especially with notices of intent and whatnot, it's pretty important to have.
When are you going to say no, though? So if somebody wants to put in an RDA or an NOI that is fairly simple, when do they get that permission? Because if they come in, for the hearing, that screws
I
them.
think that's the point at which we would basically waive the requirement. And for me, it has to do with the size of the project. If a project comes in that's very simple, buffer zone project, that in general, me as a chair, and I would hope the rest of the commission maybe doesn't feel like the scale is necessary for us to make some of our decisions. I think it would be okay to waive it, but even an RDA that might come in that's pretty complicated, we might want that on there. And I know that makes it seem like it's wishy-washy, but I think, as Bob says, it's not something we want to necessarily require for everything. But we do want it there, I feel like, for more complicated projects.
I concur. For example, if it was an 8 by 20 deck on the back of a house, 80 feet away from a bordering vegetated wetland, I think that approximation and telling us where the sonotubes will go and things like that would not require an engineered drawing. So that's kind of my line of thought.
I agree with that. I'm just a little troubled by when that's occurring. So if I've done all the paperwork for an NOI, I would have already had to have it, wouldn't I?
You would, I imagine them submitting it with that hand-drawn map and a request to waive the requirement for an engineered plan. And then that would be up to the commission to grant or deny that waiver. If the waiver was denied, we would ask the proponent to come back with an engineered drawing, which is always the open to the commission to ask for more detailed plans or more information.
Okay, so I don't know whether we can add something in there that says, unless waived by the commission, in circumstances when a hand-drawn plan can be presented or something. Because this doesn't even say it exists, you know what I mean? So you get that impression that you're always gonna have a very particular drawing ready.
Well, I think, are you saying whether or not you even have to provide a plan at all?
No, you know, like, if somebody wants to know what the regulation is for what they're doing, it would be good if it's clear they can do a hand-drawn plan for simple projects. But for anything else, you know, a drawing to scale is required, or engineering is required, or whatever. It's the way it's written still makes it look like I've got to do more rather than less, when less might work.
Right. Well, we
I-
are just talking about RDAs, because NOIs, I think most people, you know, you're gonna want to do it, you're gonna want to scale for that. And then simple projects are the ones that, or small projects, those ones in the description of the small project in the regs allows for sketches. So I think the only thing that's kind of where there'd be a question would be with an RDA, would be where we might allow a sketch.
Beth, this is Miriam. Could I make a comment?
Yeah,
The DP requirements for RDAs says an engineered stamp plan. So even under the Wetlands Protection Act, you have to make a waiver that it's not required for an RDA. So I think waiving this or not including this language under the bylaw doesn't really make sense, because you're setting up two different standards then for under the Wetlands Protection Act and the bylaw. But if you look at the RDA requirements, on, what is it, Form 1, it says an engineered stamp plan.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So there you go. So really, we can't say it as much as sometimes in the end, you know, we may, I don't know. Yeah, I think we can't be less restrictive than the state regs.
Yeah, I'm reading the regs or and it says RDA site plan or sketch drawing showing existing proposed features with dimensions relative to jurisdictional wetland areas, wetland streams, and the 100-foot buffer. So that's what I'm seeing from the DP site, which does say site plan or sketch showing proposed features.
For RDA,
Yes.
okay, so you don't see anywhere where it says to scale or stamped or anything like that?
I'm reading this from the RDA filing checklist. Maybe we table this and come back to it. But I do think that determinations can be submitted as a sketch plan.
Okay.
And just I mean, just because it's merciful to backyard project type things that they may need to file, but don't need to drop $3,000 to $5,000 on an engineered plan.
Mhm. Okay, well, let's leave this statement in then, unless waived by the commission, and look a little bit more into it before we actually vote to approve the regulations. All right. Hmm. Here's again, in addition, RDA must be accompanied by a plan or drawing with an accompanying narrative of additional information. Okay, it doesn't say anything else about the.
And 4.3 hints that we may require a professional uh, to assist should that there be a complex filing. So I think that hints that we always have the opportunity to ask for more information.
Mm-hmm. This thing jumps around too fast. I like 5.4 is good. Makes it clear that when you're doing the EP form, if there's that box for there's a box for checking off buffer zone only projects, but under our bylaw, we want people to talk more about the aura and abide by our aura requirements. Hmm. So I should look a little bit at this. So the plans were requiring that the plans be to scale unless waived, and that was a general requirement for all 3 different kinds of applications. Here we're saying that we may require supporting documents like stormwater reports and whatnot, stamped, prepared and stamped by a registered PE. So I'm wondering about just like plan sets that come with all notices of intent being prepared and stamped by a PE automatically, instead of it being a may. NOI application requirements.
I do like the kind of the escape hatch in 5.7 in that there may be a project where we wouldn't need a stamp piece drawing and the one that comes to mind is like when DEP does vegetation control, they for in a wetland when they say spray for Phragmites or something like that, they don't necessarily need to know the dimensions of the pond staked out just because they can just say the pond. So anyway, sorry, that's the only example I can come up with right now. But I think it is reasonable to give the commission an out in case the project doesn't necessarily require a full uh, PE to work on it.
Again, I'm wondering what the DEP requires. Do you want to Google that, Bob?
I,
For NOIs, do they require plan
um,
sets to be stamped? Fairly
the,
stamped?
in the actual form, there's like an instructions page, that makes up the first 3 or so pages of the application, and I do believe there is an out there as well. Let
There
me
is an out. Okay.
let me I probably should Google that another time so I can say focused here, but I do think that does give an out.
Okay, maybe that's something else we'll just look into because like I just submitted a notice of intent to Amherst and I made sure that we had stamped plans, when I submitted the NOI thinking that was a requirement, but
Yeah.
um
That's the best, but I think sanitarians can submit plans. Um, uh, talented people can give you all the information you need for a notice of intent. But I will follow up on that.
okay. Miriam, you have your hand up.
I was just thinking, and I was wrong, the RDA form just says, it mentions scale, it doesn't require a stamp plan, so my apologies, I misspoke there. I believe that the commission has the, authority to waive, stamped plans, and I know of 2 NOIs down at the lake where we did waive that requirement, maybe 3. 2 of them were minor work repairing retaining walls where it was a notice of intent, but all we required was a sketch. Because the scale didn't really make sense. We really just needed to see the design.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's most likely. I think so. I think we kind of clarified the previous discussion about the RDAs and the scale. And Miriam just said that that's the way that she agrees with that. This part with the NOIs and what's required and whether or not the Wetlands Protection Act says it, but then gives the commission the ability to waive it. I just want to check that and see if that is true. Because I think there probably is. There's probably some statement that you're allowed to waive that requirement. But we'll look back at it. All right. Should we move on to site visits and inspections? As necessary. So this. I feel like we talked about this already because I feel like legally we need to get the homeowner's approval. Didn't we talk about this already with something in a different section? Maybe it was under enforcement. We went through getting onto other people's property a little bit. Yeah, I want to look at this again, I think. Compare it to what we said previously. Right, something else to go back and look
The language looks similar to me that as it does under the Wetlands Protection Act, at least my memory of it. As far as our right under the order to enter the property doesn't supersede the people's right to keeping you out. But we also have to be able to do an inspection with their permission to see the resources in the site. Otherwise, we can't make an informed decision. So I think that kind of language is necessary. And I think it is in the Wetlands Act as well.
at. But down here, we say before site inspections can be made. Right, site requirements prior to inspection. Before site inspection can be made by the commission or the commission's representative, the following conditions must be met. Submission of site access authorization form. So most applications that we receive have a signed site access authorization form. So then with that, we then have the permission to go on the site. But up here, we've got site visits shall occur as necessary and required information. Site visits may occur without advance notice to an applicant or permit holder if emergency conditions warrant. I guess that if it's an emergency. Under non-urgent conditions, the commission shall give the applicant or the representative advance notice of the site visit. Refusal to permit timely site inspection or may result in enforcement action. Yeah, that's a good. I don't know about 623. I'm not sure we can force people to. And that's just not something we usually do. I mean, I guess I kind of understand that if you're going to a house, you want to know the address. And if somebody didn't have their house for some reason marked, we could ask them to mark it so we could find it. I just don't think that's something we usually do. What do you guys think? No comments?
I don't see a downside to it. The downside to not have it would be you drive up and down the same road trying to find a spot. So I I put myself through UMass Amherst delivering pizza, and I was surprised how many places didn't have a mailbox or number on their house. So
Yeah, there's a lot. All right, we can leave it in there. I don't know.
Yeah, this is
I
Miriam.
find it a little odd. I don't think I would force somebody to
Have you
do that. So
ever-
I'd be sure to be able to find their house.
Yeah. Have you ever not, like, has this ever come up? I mean, has there ever been an
Not
occasion
for
where
me.
you go to a property to do a site visit and you don't know, there's nobody there?
Oh, there's nobody there?
Like,
Yeah,
isn't it
that's
like,
happened to me. That's
Okay.
happened to me, but this is saying that we're asking
have to
them
have
to, you know, put a sign out at the end of their driveway saying,
Oh, no,
370
that's
Monica
not,
Road,
yeah,
even
that's
though
what I'm
they don't.
saying. Usually there's
Yeah.
somebody there, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
Well,
to
you
meet
know, it
you,
could
so
be,
that why would they would tell you and give you directions up if there was something that was out of the ordinary, you know?
Can I make a comment?
I'm sorry, Miriam, one moment. Sometimes it's an undeveloped lot that they're doing a project on, so it's just you're going down a road and there's
Right,
nothing but trees, so and there is no
right.
mark or pullover spot.
Yeah, it's fine. I don't want to make it some kind of a requirement, I guess. I with the way GPS is nowadays, you know, you put in an
Right.
address and it tells you where to go, whether or not the house is marked or not. You're probably gonna find
Mhm.
it. Miriam?
Yeah, this was in some other towns' regulations, and I think the thought is also one for undeveloped lots. It's really the applicant's responsibility to make sure you can find it. So it's marked in some way, but also you don't want to be accidentally walking onto somebody else's property because it's unmarked and you don't know where you're going. That would be unfortunate, I think.
Right.
So that's the reason for
Mhm.
it.
I mean, I think it's just cleaner
fine.
to say that, you know, like, you need to provide just, I think you need to provide the information if it's something that like, there's not that many lots that are being built in Shutesbury. And if you don't have a house number, somebody needs to be there to, you know, kind of explain things, you know what I mean? So,
Right.
The only
Yeah.
instance I can think of this past year was Mark Whiteman, and he clearly marked the spot where we were supposed to go.
right,
I haven't had any trouble finding a place,
right.
not even the unmarked culvert on Baker Road, so that's not a big worry.
Yeah. Small town. We'll
Yeah,
find things, but we'll
exactly.
leave it, guess we'll leave it in there in case of like a subdivision development. I can see having the lots marked. All
Right.
right, fees.
The only concern I have on fees was 713, was it 713 or so? Yeah, 713. Maybe it was 712. Where we find a need to consult with others and then the cost incurred is paid by the homeowner, the permit owner. There's no
Right.
cap on that, and that's a little concerning to me to have an open-ended requirement for an unknown number of consultants or engineers or whatever at our behest. That wide open door seems like it could become a problem for a homeowner. So I don't know how you encapsulate that so it doesn't get out of control for somebody's pocketbook, essentially.
Well, the way I've seen it work is, um, you get a quote from, say it's a wetland scientist who's doing like a third party review of a delineation. And it's a large project, so the commission feels like they can't sort of a review the delineation themselves. So they want to have third party. The applicant really doesn't have much choice in terms of the commission making that decision. You know, if the commission decides that they really feel like they need it, that's part of this whole process of submitting an application. But the way it does work is you do get quotes and you share that with the applicant. The applicant knows the cost of everything ahead of time. And I really do feel like these third-party reviews, at least in my experience, have been for much larger projects. I guess I don't know how else to write it. I mean, because that is part of
So it's your experience that if a,
bylaw.
you know, a regular homeowner has a professional under hire to put together plans, that you're not likely to have to challenge those, so that isn't really a concern? Is that the idea?
So wait, this says it. Nothing shall agree in writing to pay fees, costs, and expenses of an expert consultant if the commission deems it necessary to review or other application. So this is, so if somebody came forward with just a delineation and we had kind of like an issue with part of the delineation, that's a little different because then we're just telling them that they should tell their scientists to go back and look at a couple points. You know, say we have issue with like 3 or 4 of the points. They may have to pay their own consultant a little bit more to look at those again and move them wherever so that we agree with that. But this also gets into if the commission wants to hire their own third party expert to review an application like an RDA or any of the applications. So that's a little different. That's the situation I was saying with larger projects, an entire delineation or an entire NOI. If we want it reviewed by a third party, somebody that the town hires, somebody that the commission hires, that expense is covered by the applicant.
Yeah, I like just like to say I think that's really critical that and it is allowed under the Wetlands Protection Act as well that a third party independent consultant be available for the commission should it be decided that they need more intense review for generally a large or specific type project. I think that's critical.
Yep. And I think that process is discussed in another spot in the regulations too. This is just about the fee part of it. But there's the idea of the commission having the right to hire a third party. And a third party can be hired to review a delineation. They can be hired to review just a stormwater report. They can be hired to review an entire NOI. It's all what the commission thinks they need. All right, and here's our fee schedule that has already been approved by the select board, so we're not changing it. We'll just zoom right past that. Consultants and consultant fees. There we go.
Quick question on the top box. It says SPP.
Small project permit.
Wow, okay, all right.
This is the same thing that we were just talking about. So under MGL chapter 44, 53G, the commission has basically the right to ask for third party review and have the applicant pay for it. Such consulting fees should be reasonable and are appropriate to work undertaken. So I'm sure that language is, right out of the 53G law. So there is a limit to what the commission can be asking for. And an applicant can argue that. For these large projects, the applicant probably has a lawyer, and they're gonna know all about this process and be able to say, oh, you're not being reasonable with what you're asking for. Here it is. Reasonable fees. And here's the process. What time is it? Oh, 7 o'clock. Uh-oh. How much is left of this? All right, so we need to get back. We're at section 8, consultants and consultant fees. We are getting so close to the bottom of this. But all right, we will stop there. All right, it's 7:02 on June 12th. And we already opened this meeting, but now we're starting our regular Concom meeting. And first on the agenda is comments from the chair. The only comment I have is that, Jan, you're all right with me sharing the fact that you have decided to end your tenure with the Conservation Commission at the end of June.
That is correct.
And you had is yours a 3-year, 1 year?
I completed the remainder of Miriam's appointment.
Which
So
was
it was
1
a
and a
year and a
half,
quarter or something like that.
1 and a quarter, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can't say how much I appreciate everything that you've done, just doing all the site visits. You just jumped right in and it's been great. So we'll have to find someone else who would like to volunteer to do all of that, maybe Mayor. But we'll figure it all out, but you've been
Yeah.
super helpful.
Can I make a motion that Jan remains to do the minutes? Thank you, Jan. It's been great having you on the commission and being able to just bolt out and do inspections at the library or whatever. So thank you very much for all your help and service.
It's okay. The
You-
library's growing frogs now. You're all set.
Awesome. So you have
Thank
one
you,
more
Jan.
meeting though, right? We'll be at our second June meeting.
Yep.
Okay. What are you gonna do with all
Yes,
your
thank you,
time?
Jan.
It's multiple retirements, right?
All right. Yeah, I don't think I had anything else. All right, so moving on to number 3 on the agenda, which is to review and vote on the minutes of May 2nd. Does anybody have any comments or changes for those minutes? Okay, seeing none, I take a motion to approve the minutes of May 22nd.
So moved.
I will second.
All right, roll call. Douglas,
Aye.
Fox,
Aye.
Rowan,
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Oh, he is there. Good.
I
And Wilson, aye. All right. 4 on the agenda is site visits update. Jan?
So for site visits, Mary and I will split this. She's actually moving into the library. You're all set there.
Thank you.
But on May 27th, I did the paperwork. And there was nothing much to report. The sediment level at that point was still fairly low along the socks and the curtains. The grass was germinating. I said the same thing that I've been saying right along. If you repair the settling ponds and you take care of the wattles and complete the landscaping, everything will be lovely. At that point, there was really no worries. And yeah, I didn't have anything much to comment on that day. But Mayor's turn.
So Jan and I went out on Tuesday and which was the 10th, and this is my second time going through it, and it seemed, so Jan's given me instructions and what to look for, and Roger went, and it seems like, I understand where, they're kind of trying to keep costs down and not adding more of the what are they called, wattles, right? So not adding more of those, but there were a couple places where it didn't, it seemed like maybe they should add some more to that, because their practice is to put a new one on top of it if things are washing away, but also they don't seem to be none of the areas seem to be where ones where it has gone over the barrier, the black barrier behind the wattles, and um so they just put more wattles up. But the ponds, I think Jan's been saying that since I got onto this commission about the retention ponds and how we're seeing evidence of the dirt that's in there. The grass is growing, but the dirt that's in there on top of the rocks. So Jan, talked to Roger about that, but I think those things keep getting passed along. So I'm hoping that I can take this over and do what Jan's been doing all along, but and just keep reporting back about what's going on. But he did seem to think that everything was going to work out in the end, right, Jan?
Definitely. I did send a couple of pictures along too, that where the wattles are getting overtopped by the mud.
Exactly.
It's not leaking out of the curtain yet, but we're at that
Right.
place. We've been getting easily an inch and a half or so of rain in between every
Right.
visit or more. And if we have another good rainfall, there's a
Right.
good chance it could leak out if they don't do something
Yeah.
between now and then.
I
Did they
think the
say they
biggest
were
concern.
gonna? Did they, when you said that, did they say, oh yeah, we're getting more wattles
Oh,
for that
no.
area over
They do
there?
not. Well, what they had taken to doing was digging out in front of the wattles rather than adding anything. They did add a few when they did the electric line into the, back into the back of the lot.
Yeah.
They know. I mean, they're just
They know.
dragging their feet so that they can
Yep.
get to the guy that comes and does the landscaping. Let's
When
just
did they give any idea of when they're gonna get to that point? where,
Oh, it's getting sooner and sooner. You know, most of the work is done around the main building. They've got
Okay.
all the drain holes in place. Roger was pointing all that out, you know,
Mhm.
gonna, you know, bring up the level of the dirt. That could be the next big problem there, is when they do that.
Right.
oh yeah,
But that retention basin that's closest to the road, you know, it's
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 not much
not
of a
where
retention pond.
it's not much of a retention pond.
But it's the last retention pond in the series, you know.
Exactly.
They keep emphasizing that.
Exactly.
The fact is, it doesn't have much freeboard.
Work to do. Yeah.
well, they may want to think though about, cleaning out those basins before before they bring the ground up to where they want it to be and start loaming and whatever else they're doing,
Mhm.
because they're gonna have to get big equipment down to like the one you're talking about, the third one by the road, to clean it out, which is something that they've told us that they're gonna do, you know, before they leave the site, is they're gonna clean out those basins so that they will work as infiltration basins. And I just know, see, I can picture that scene where they like, they raise the dirt up, they start their loam, and then they're like, oh, you want us to drive over what we just did to clean that out? You know, we don't want to do that. We want to
I
drive over our
totally,
new beautiful yard.
totally see
So,
that happening. It's like, we just landscaped it. Now you want us to go clean
yeah,
out this basin? Yeah, and
that's what they would do.
thank you for keeping on top of it, Jan and Mara, because
Yeah.
you know when they're all filled in with silt, they just don't function for what we need them to do. So
Well,
Right.
I'm glad
they
you
are
got them
all
done.
filled in with silt. But the
Yeah.
other strange thing that
They
Roger
are.
said, and he never said this before, was that they were flipping coins about whether to raise the sides of that retention pond closest to the road. Because it's kind of like a kid's wading pool, you know. It's
Right.
raised up on the edges, where the others don't have that weird feature. They've kind of got a
Mm.
dike going around it, right?
Mm.
And I don't know what you intended, but they have the feeling like, well, the water's just allowed to run right out of there and into the field, you know, on the other
Right.
side of the fence, which it does do. But
Right.
there's, you know, is really borderline on what you meant, I think.
Right. Yeah, he was like, "Well, it's not gonna go anywhere. It's just gonna go in the field, you know."
But it'll go
Okay.
in the field without having the stuff, the sediment
Right.
settle out, right? So that might be something to keep an eye on too, because I
Right.
don't know even why they'd be flipping a coin about that. They can see the thing doesn't work quite right. I would think that would be something you'd jump on.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Usually contractors, um, I don't know, if they don't think something's gonna work, you know, they say it, they notice that they change, they'll even change the design so that it does work. Um, you don't want them just going along with the design, even if they think it's not gonna do what it's supposed to do. But also we need to make sure that they are building it according to what the design sheet looks like. You know, maybe next time, if I come do a site visit with you guys, we can bring the plan set and take a good look and make sure that they are, you know, and then eventually we'll want like as-built and that kind of thing from them. Um,
He might have been just testing the water, you know, to see whether we threw a fit over what he was saying. You know, do we have
Right.
to do it or do we not have to do it, kind of a deal.
yeah, contractors are definitely that way. They
Yeah.
push it.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
gotta push back.
I mean, but definitely between the first visit I went to, which I think was like a month ago, and then this visit, that last retention basin closest to the street was definitely filled in more. It definitely had filled in. So,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when the next visit is.
it's
If I can
2
go, I'll
weeks,
go, but
right?
if not, I think
Okay.
it's worth mentioning to them, that they should think about their phasing, and that if they want to get in and they're required to clean those basins out, and that they should think about the timing of when they're gonna do that versus when they're gonna really
Mm.
start landscaping and stuff.
Okay,
The next one probably, unless we have a big washout again, would be the 24th of June.
right.
So if you want to go, Beth, do you want to make that like a 3:30 deal?
24th. Yeah, 3:30. I don't have my calendar, but yeah, 3:30. If we could
Okay,
make it
that
that.
works.
I think the 20, is that a Tuesday? Yeah, that's a Tuesday. I think I can do that day.
Okay,
Well, we have time to adjust it, but you know, we can tell them that.
Okay. All right, Jan, are there any other site visit reports?
No, that was it.
All right. So, fifth on the agenda is land management update. And I guess we lost Scott. He said he couldn't stay for the whole meeting. So, and I don't
Okay.
think there is anything going on with land management at the moment anyway, now that we got through town meeting and the CPA articles. All right, so it is 7:16, and I see Miriam's all ready to talk about her administrative approval.
I think,
Go
I
ahead.
think my husband wanted to ask a question now first. This
Yeah,
is Rob.
Rob Kibler, on
Rob.
of the detention pond next to the road. You said it was diked. Doesn't that prevent water from running into it? And kind of defeat its purpose?
Water's piped in.
Water's piped in, but the surrounding area is directed away from it?
The whole premise of the way the thing is built appears to be the water's piped in from various locations on the construction property. They go through various other filtrations, and then that's the last pond.
Mhm.
Then since it's kind of flat, I think their idea was it was just going to flow straight out of that last retention pond and on into the field on the outside of the fence where you know water would run off in any event. So by the time it runs off out into that field, it should have had all the sediment settled out. That's the design plan. When I said dike, I just mean they put some walls on it because otherwise it was fairly flat right there.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead with the vernal pool discussion.
Yeah, so we presented some data to the Conservation Commission about a pool on our property that we've been documenting and observing for about 5 years. I mean, for 25 years since we've owned the property, but in you know, deliberately and carefully in the last 5 years, in hopes of getting it certified by Natural Heritage because we believe it's a vernal pool. Routinely has vernal pool species breeding in it and living in and around it. But we would also like to have an opinion from the Conservation Commission because it is a protected resource area under the bylaw, which is different than state law. The Wetlands Protection Act doesn't specifically protect vernal pools. It doesn't recognize them as a resource area unless they meet the very specific criteria for isolated land subject to flooding. And so Natural Heritage has its own process, but since it is under the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction, we've already had professional delineations of the BVW that surrounds this pool, and we've presented that to the commission in the past. The commission has been out to our property at least twice, and I believe each time we showed them the pool in years gone by, and it routinely holds water for really several months of the year, definitely during the growing period for vernal pool species, but you know, it's almost that period of time is almost done and it's holding water, and sometimes we see it full of water in the fall and the winter. So the commission doesn't really have a procedure for this. I think, to be efficient, we don't believe a RDA or an ANRAD is appropriate because we're not proposing any work or alteration in this area. We just want it to be recognized and protected. So we're hoping to do this under an administrative approval. We have not paid the fee for the administrative approval, but I'm happy to drop off a check in the Dropbox tomorrow. And, in terms of how it gets communicated, if it was just reflected in tonight's minutes that the commission reviewed the data and, had an opinion that it met the definitions under the bylaw for a vernal pool, that would be enough for us.
Well, I guess I'm just wondering, so under the state, vernal pools are, like you said, they're land, isolated land subject to flooding is usually the category they fall under. And any time under the Wetlands Protection Act that a resource area, even that kind, is delineated or identified, it does have sort of a time limit. I know I saw in your request letter that you kind of referred to natural heritage way of just certifying a vernal pool, and that doesn't tend to have a time limit to it. But to me, that's kind of the difference between the way natural heritage looks at things and the way the Wetlands Protection Act and then our bylaw look at things. Our bylaw so much mimics the Wetlands Protection Act.
The way the bylaw is written, a vernal pool is presumed to be a vernal pool as long as the physical characteristics are present. Vernal pools don't require vegetation for delineation. That's not one of the criteria for a vernal pool. So unless somebody excavated it and changed the physical characteristics of it, it would remain a vernal pool under the bylaw, unless, somebody documented it for 5 straight years and were able to show that it was not functioning as a vernal pool in 3 of the 5 years. That's the way the regulations have been written. So 1 year time limit just doesn't make sense, because that means every year we would have to submit a new certification request and document it every year. And so in order to protect it, we would have to be always documenting and observing it. And that seems onerous for something that the bylaw presumes to exist as long as it's not being altered. I mean, as long as the depression exists, then it's presumed to be a vernal pool, capable of being a vernal pool.
Well, I guess I disagree in that, like, all wetlands can basically dry up and change depending on all kinds of factors. That's why delineations are usually only good for 3 years for all kinds of resource areas. Be them even rivers. You don't think that a river bank is going to change, but in 3 years,
So
it could change a little bit.
To approve it, like, what data would you be requiring? Because would we have to be documenting, would, for example, if we submitted photographs showing that it was still holding water, would that be sufficient, or do we have to go out and check for egg masses and choruses every 3 years? And what would be the criteria?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the way with all delineations that it's done, is that every 3 years, people have to have delineations kind of rechecked to make sure. And so identifying something as a vernal pool, that's part of a delineation. If somebody's going out and delineating something, oh, here's BVW, and they flag it, and then they go, oh, that has evidence of being a vernal pool. I'm calling that part a vernal pool. And once it's called a vernal pool, you're right, it has different protection than a BVW does under our bylaw. But the actual delineation part, to me, I still feel like after 3 years needs to be refreshed.
But are you saying all of the criteria would have to be presented, or if, for example, we showed that it continues to have the same morphology and hydrology characteristics, would that be sufficient? Because there's really, like, there's the physical characteristics, the hydrology, and then the species. It's a lot more work and it's more complicated. And in a given year, you may not see a vernal pool species for a variety of reasons. That's why usually, like, the regulations say that if you're going to rebut the existence of a vernal pool, you would have to present data from 3 out of 5 consecutive years because any given 1 year might not have a species. So I'm just concerned that we would be in a situation where it would lose protection in one single year. So I'm just trying to find out what would be your requirements for.
Well, say, say we do the 3-year thing. So we're not just talking about the 1-year thing, but say it's an approval of it being a vernal pool and it's protected as a vernal pool for three years in a row. Then when you come back to me, it's similar to having a wetland delineation updated, which is often what happens after if a ANRAD or something expires and somebody still hasn't done their project, they want to, have their ANRAD, we say, well, you have to have the delineation updated. Often, wetland scientist goes out and sort of checks the delineation that they already had and does a more simple look at the delineation. So I feel like what you said about showing that the hydrology was the same, maybe the topography is the same, that then it could be extended again for another 3 years. That's how I feel about it. But the rest of the commission, does anybody have comments on that?
I certainly sympathize. It is kind of tricky, in that in order to have a full delineation done, it's expensive and I was wondering if there was some way, like an observation of a vernal pool could just be, Miriam suggested put in the minutes, and that way, should any future construction come up, then that that could be looked at, be something that's marked in the record that for any future event, it would be available to say, okay, well, we want to build a shopping mall here. Is there is there any possible protected status that needs to be put in our application for review? Is it a vernal pool? Well, let's look into that. So I guess in my mind, it would be kind of a placeholder, letting everybody be aware that at least at one point in its existence, it was a vernal pool, and then any new notice of intent has to come in under its own capabilities and take into account what's there or what's not there. So that's kind of how I saw this possibly being put together.
I would just say, it's a little different than the delineation of BVW because, BVW, usually the standard is that after 3 years, a delineation may not be accurate, but you can delineate a BVW different times of year based on the soils and vegetation or seeing hydrology. But with vernal pools, it's a very specific, very narrow window of time. And in any given year, you might not be able to observe breeding species. However, you would be able to see that the morphology of the pool hasn't changed and that there's still hydrology present. So, that's where I was hoping for a little bit more flexibility because let's say 3 years from now, we collect data and we can't find data that year, then the pool loses protection and we have to wait a whole nother year before we can observe it again. It's not like we can just go out and get it delineated at any time of year. So, and then, it's possible that there could be some project that would hurt it. We brought this up because we became aware that there was going to be a utility line tree cutting in the vernal pool during the breeding season. And that was what prompted us was our realizing that, this vernal pool could have been really damaged and disrupted. The breeding habitat could have been disrupted by, tree limbs falling in the pool. So
when Ward Smith delineated, he didn't get to that part of the yard, or did he delineate?
Delineated at the beginning of March and it wasn't the right time of year to delineate it. And it's, delineation of a vernal pool requires going out multiple times, going out at night to get chorusing frogs. Would be very costly for us to hire a wetland scientist to come out multiple days to go out at 11 o'clock at night to document chorusing frogs. So that feels really burdensome for an effort to protect a resource area where there's no proposed work. That feels like it would be impossible. That would cost us thousands of dollars.
So he called it a BVW. He called that same area BVW.
I've already determined there's a BVW. I mean, we've had a notice of intent. No, did we have a notice of intent? No, we've had 2 RDAs and a couple of emergency certifications. And the commission came out and did site visits, and we provided a professional delineation and an engineer stamp plan that showed that there's a BVW and an intermittent stream. And this pool is within that BVW.
Is it? Okay. I guess, I mean, what we could do is we could say that you've come forward presenting evidence that part of a BVW that was delineated, I think I saw the date of March 2025 was the last time that Ward actually looked at that. So you've brought forward evidence that part of a delineated BVW is a vernal pool. And to me, the evidence you presented, the pictures and the forms that you filled out does prove that it is a vernal pool. So we could, in the minutes, agree that a portion of that BVW has been shown to be a vernal pool. And that it's that way as of today. And it should be protected that way. But for example, when that delineation expires, the one that you've done for the BVW, and say you want to do work down the road, I mean, I think we would want the BVW redelineated after 3 years. We would also want the vernal pool sort of identified by a wetland scientist at that point too.
I don't understand how you could require that. That is a very, I mean, that's a very expensive undertaking. That would cost probably 10 times what an average delineation would cost, because we're talking about multiple site visits and going out in off hours. I mean,
No, I think you're thinking of having it, the things you have to do to get it certified by Natural Heritage. For the Conservation Commission to make sort of a conclusion like we are tonight, that we think that is a vernal pool area, doesn't necessarily require all the same thing that Natural Heritage does to certify one as a vernal pool.
okay, so
A little bit of a difference.
Because it sounded like you were saying that we would need to. So, there in the regulations, it says to rebut the existence or presumption of a vernal pool, you would have to, somebody trying to rebut it. Let's say we got a neighbor who wanted to rebut it, didn't like the fact that there's a vernal pool and wants to say it isn't a vernal pool, let's say. The regulations say they would have to present data from 3 out of 5 consecutive years. But if you're saying that it's only determined to be a vernal pool for 3 years, then they don't have to do that necessarily. The burden would be on us to prove that it is, as opposed to the burden on them to prove that it isn't, because it would just automatically expire in 3 years and we would have to represent it. I think what I'm hearing you say.
I think so, because I feel like that's in accordance with the Wetlands Protection Act. I feel like that's the way the state law works in terms of vernal pools that are part of isolated land subject to flooding. Under the Wetlands Protection Act, it doesn't, it expires.
It says there is a presumption that it's unless rebutted, I believe is the language in the bylaw. So that's what we're going by, is under the bylaw, not the Wetlands Protection Act. We're not asking for a determination that it's an isolated land subject to flooding. If we were going to do that, then I think we would submit an RDA for that. Okay, all right.
So I guess I'm wondering if the commission has any comments on that approach, that tonight, if everyone's comfortable with what the evidence that Miriam presented, that we agree that it's a vernal pool, and the minutes will reflect that. And my thought is that its expiration will kind of go with the delineation of the BVW that it's within that was, that Miriam's had done in her yard.
Does that mean that we have to submit an RDA? Well, you approved, that delineation was submitted with an emergency permit, emergency certification, so, is that how the commission's regarding the approval of that BBW then, under the emergency cert?
Sure. Because we did a site visit. Bob did the site visit, I think.
Yes, I did, heard chorusing on that area on multiple occasions.
Okay.
On a related topic, and we can put this on maybe the agenda for a different time, but we have been unable to complete the work that was approved under the emergency cert because the groundwater has been so high that the construction company can't get in to do the work. And it's really a problem. We need to get it done. We needed to get it done back in April. So the emergency certification has expired, so we were going to resubmit a new request. As soon as we know
Okay.
it can be done, we don't know when it can be done.
Well, yeah, just keep us updated whenever you need an emergency cert. Let us know when you're
Yeah.
ready to do the work.
Okay.
So that was my approach. How does the commission feel?
I would like to make a motion to that effect.
All right. Second? Second? Anyone?
I'll second it.
All right. Then we'll do roll call. Rowan,
Aye.
Fox,
I,
and Douglas? Douglas?
Oh, I said aye, but I was muted. Sorry.
Right. And Wilson, aye. All right. So that's in the minutes. So we're good with that then. Next on our agenda is the library site discussion of the restoration report from Ward. Mary Ann? Hello.
Hi, Penny's here too.
Oh, hi. Penny.
But Penny doesn't have her video on. So Ward came out for his fourth visit, as was required, and looked at the vegetation in the restoration area on the east side of the property. And then he went back to, and I forget which numbers they are. But anyway, he thinks, you know, that it's,
BBW2 is the one on the east side.
and then the other one's BBW3.
Yep.
And he thought that the vegetation was looking good and that we met the goals of it, and that it was successful.
And so our question to the commission is, do you want to visit it? Are you comfortable with this report? You know, our goal is to submit a request for a certificate of compliance and close this out when we're able to. So we look to you for direction as to how you want to proceed.
I'm satisfied with the report, although we are out at the site all the time anyway, so maybe when we come by on June 24th, we can take a quick look at those two restoration areas too. But it looks like from the report that they're completely revegetated, and the hydrology all looks great. It sounds, you know, BBW2 has always kind of had this portion of it, little 25% that's maybe not quite a wetland. But I think everything looks really great, but we should take a look, so.
Good. So perhaps we can request that after you've looked at it and assuming you're satisfied, you can let us know and we'll submit the request for a certificate of compliance. Sound good?
Sounds great. Sounds perfect.
Well, that was easy. I hope.
So we were talking about 3:30 on the 24th. Does
Yeah.
that work for you guys?
Yeah. Yeah, and I've already let the construction crew know, and then I'll join you so that I can, if they all leave, because they usually leave at about 3:30, then I can be there to lock the gate. So, and the BVW2 is on the other side of the fence, so we could do the one inside the fence first, and then do the other one. So, okay,
Okay,
good,
sounds great.
okay,
We'll
all
move
right,
along.
all right,
See
thank
you
you.
then.
Okay,
Thanks.
All
Have a
right.
good night.
you too.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Under unanticipated business, Bob, you wanted to talk about being a liaison, right, to LWAC?
Yeah, the Lake the LWAC was built in its charter to have representatives from several different committees, planning, I believe, safety, as well as the Conservation Commission. And Mary David was that liaison, I know, and there's not been one since she left. So I, I know the lake. I oversee 3 lakes as part of my job, or ponds, I should say, and I'm a member of the COLAP, which is a lake organization. So I do go to some of the LWAC meetings over the course of the year. So if the commission would be so inclined, I would appreciate a vote to be selected as the liaison.
I'm 100% in support of that. Jan,
I guess
Mayor?
my question is, we can recommend somebody to LWAC, but does LWAC not get to say yay or nay?
So
I
Bob,
believe
it sounds
that
like they typically have a liaison from the Concom?
they're required. That's part of the their charter, is to have a uh, board appointed representative to that just to serve on LWAC. So it would be this board would select that person, as does the planning board, and perhaps the Board of Health. I'm not sure exactly what other ones. I believe there's a safety committee, and I did the dam keeper, I think, is also on the LWAC, as well as the other board members.
Oh, I don't have an issue with that. I just want to make sure that procedurally it goes the same, it goes as described, and LWAC doesn't think they're supposed to approve the recommendations of whoever's, coming in from other groups.
I think that's so, like, I represent the Concom on CPA, and that's the same thing, is that the Concom picks a person to represent them on some of these other committees. So it would be us choosing somebody to represent us on LWAC. So if there's no other comments, I take a motion to approve Bob as our representative or liaison to LWAC.
Sure. I motion.
Second.
All right, roll call. Rowan,
Aye.
Fox,
Bye.
Douglas.
I get to vote? Yeah, aye.
Oh, that's true. Maybe not.
I don't think so.
And Wilson, aye.
That's
All
bias.
right,
That's bias,
congratulations.
Bob.
Thank you, everybody.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Now we can hear all the scoop of what happens at LWAC meetings. It's gonna be
Mhm.
great.
I think it would be good. I mean, I believe that with the exception of the Lake Wyola Association, I think the Conservation Commission or the state is the largest landholder on the pond. So it's good to have representation.
Mhm. I agree. Are you still on the sedimentation task force? Is that group still going or are they done?
Yeah, so that probably is due for a report too. The last meeting was just amazing. That is has been a super group to work with. They've applied for a grant from FERCog with a substantial match, and the town is contributing it as well as the Lake Wyola Association. So that grant will study the sedimentation going into the lake and the roadways, et cetera. So and that could potentially lead to future filings to keep sediment out of the lake. So it's gone really well. I have nothing but really good things to say about the chairperson, Jennifer Wallace, and as well as all the other participants on the group.
And it's a group that's gonna just keep going. I mean, they got one grant, but you guys are still gonna just keep meeting however often you meet and
Yeah, actually, no.
Mhm.
The committee sunsets with with this recommendation, I believe, to the select board, and what its future is, I don't know, but it has been effective. So it'd be interesting to see what comes of this grant. But I'm excited that something will come out of it. I have found documents from the 1990s saying that the roads at Lake Wyola are causing sediment going into the lake, and they need to appoint a committee. And it hasn't gotten better since the 1990s. So I'm excited to see what comes out of this.
That's great. And the
Bob,
grant, go
I'm
ahead,
sorry, go
Mary.
ahead. So are you talking about the Lake Wyola Stormwater Erosion Task Force
Right?
or is
Yeah.
that, oh, okay.
That's it. So
I mean-
that is to my knowledge is sunsetting. The most recent thing I saw said we may have our last meeting on the 29th of this month. So, but a conclusion has been made, a report sent to the select board, and that's something that I can also see is sent to the Conservation Commission.
Mhm.
Yeah, we'd love to see that. And the grant is with FERCog, and that's FERCog is submitting to the grant organization or
Yeah, that's my understanding, and it did
Okay.
require a match, and both LWA and the town is chipping in that. I think it's just 10% or something like that, split in half. So
but it's been
it's
figured out.
it's a cool deal.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, I hope there's a stormwater task force too in a couple years or something. But, all right. I'm a little exhausted from what's been going on with my job and my life. I don't think I'm ready to go back to the regulations, even though it is only 10 of
Yeah.
8.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
Okay,
I
so
second
we'll
that emotion.
so we'll start at 6 again, 2 weeks from today then, and see if we can, get to the end of the regulations. I think we
Great.
can make it. So, all right.
The end is in sight. Good work, everyone.
I
Yeah.
know, I can't believe it. That'll feel so good once we,
Mhm.
so the process would just be, we'll get to the end of it and then I'm gonna take it and, just go through and make a clean copy and a real nice red line copy of it. And then we'll have a public hearing about it.
Excellent.
And then once we get through the public hearing and the commission votes to approve, we're good. We're good to go.
Great.
All right, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I motion.
I'll
Second,
second that. Oh, I beat you
Okay.
to it, Mayor.
Excellent. All right, Douglas,
Hi.
Fox,
I.
Rowan,
I.
and Wilson. Aye. All right, thanks, everyone.
Great, thank you. Good
Okay.
night,
Good
everyone.
night.
Good night.